For my daughter's birthday, my father handed her a stick and said with a smirk, "Only my favorite grandkids get the good gifts." Everyone around us burst out laughing, but about an hour later, that laughter faded into dead silence. The second I saw that stick in her little hands, I knew exactly what he was pulling. That wasn't some harmless joke. At least, not to him. It was a message, one he'd been delivering for years, just wrapped differently each time. Sometimes through words, sometimes through silence, and often through other people. The message was simple: some of us mattered to him. Some of us were worth his attention, his affection, and his money. And the rest of us? We were just there to watch. He handed over that brittle twig, probably something he snapped off a branch right before coming inside, and flashed that smug grin like it was the cleverest thing in the world. "Only my favorite grandkids get the nice gifts," he repeated with a chuckle, like he was some kind of comedian. The room lit up with laughter. Everyone thought it was hilarious. Everyone but me. And my little girl. She was only 7, too young to fake a smile or pretend it didn't hurt. Her tiny hands held that useless stick like she was trying to figure out what she'd done wrong. Then she looked up at me, and I'll never forget it, those big, bright blue eyes full of confusion and just a little bit of heartbreak. I had to fight back the lump rising in my throat. I knew that look. I'd worn it myself once upon a time. I'd seen it in old family photos, in reflections in store windows, back when I was a kid standing outside while my siblings picked out toys and I was told to wait my turn, which never came. The laughter kept growing, like they were all in on the same unspoken joke. Like this was just normal. Like these were the rules of the family and we were all supposed to go along with it. I looked across the room at my father. That same smug, self-satisfied smile was plastered on his face, the one he always wore when he thought he'd won something. Like life was some kind of game, and he was always a few moves ahead. And right then, something broke inside me. Not just anger. Not just bitterness. It was something deeper. Something final. I knelt down beside my daughter and gently rested my hand on her shoulder. "Go play with your cousins," I whispered. My voice was calm. Unshaken. She hesitated for a second, then gave a small nod and walked away, still holding onto that stick like it meant something. I stood there and watched. Watched my father toast glasses with my older brother, the golden boy, the one who always got the big presents and the back pats. Watched my mother sitting off to the side, pretending not to notice any of it. Just like she always did. I took in a deep breath, let it out slow, and made up my mind. That was the last time my daughter would ever be humiliated by that man. The last time he'd get the upper hand. For the next hour, I didn't say a word. I just watched. Watched him laugh it up with my brother's kids, slipping them fresh $100 bills like he was some generous old king. Watched my mother act like she couldn't see my daughter sitting by herself, quietly turning that stick over in her hands while the other kids bragged about their gifts. I caught my siblings shooting me nervous glances from across the room, waiting for me to do what I always did, to shrug it off, let it slide, play the peacekeeper. But not this time. This time, I stayed quiet. I waited. Then, when the moment felt right, I stood up slow and steady, walked across the room, and placed a small, neatly wrapped box right in my father's lap. His smug little grin started to falter. "What's this?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "A gift," I said, my voice calm, even friendly. He chuckled like it was some inside joke, tapping the box against his palm. "Oh, yeah? Should I be nervous?" The room chuckled along with him. But under the surface, the air shifted. Just a little. Like a storm cloud forming in the distance. I gave him a warm smile. "Not at all." He shrugged and tore off the wrapping paper. Inside the box was a small black jewelry case. Fancy looking. Made it feel important. Promising, he muttered as he popped it open. Silence. Inside, nestled in a bed of dark velvet, was a single wooden toothpick. His face changed instantly, went dark, tight. "What the hell is this supposed to be?" I leaned in just a bit, dropped my voice low so only he could hear. "Only my favorite dads get real presents." All the laughter died at once. A quiet ripple passed through the room. People started picking up on what was happening. My mother stiffened in her chair. My brother's cocky little smirk slipped right off his face. My sister looked like she'd just swallowed something sour. My father just stared at me, his face getting redder by the second. "Excuse me?" I held his gaze. Didn't blink. I said, "Only my favorite dads get real presents." Isn't that how this works? From behind me, I heard my daughter giggle, a soft, sweet little sound that made my heart ache. His jaw clenched so hard I thought he might crack a tooth. He turned to my mother like he expected her to swoop in and smooth things over. She didn't. For once, she kept her mouth shut. Just sat there, hands folded in her lap, stone still. I crossed my arms and let the weight of the moment settle. You spent years making sure we all knew where we stood. All I'm doing is playing by your rules. The silence that followed hit different. Heavy. Real. Then, from the far end of the room, a voice cut through it all. You know, my cousin said, he's not wrong. Everything shifted. It was like the walls of that room exhaled after holding their breath for years. My father turned sharply, eyes narrowed. What did you just say? My cousin Mark didn't even flinch. He casually swirled the drink in his glass, leaning back in his chair like he'd been waiting for this moment. I said he's not wrong. We've all seen it. He looked around the room, daring anyone to argue. The favoritism. The way you treat some of us like we matter, and the rest like we're just background noise. A quiet murmur rolled through the family like thunder in the distance. Folks started looking around, exchanging glances. At me. At him. At each other. I watched my mom swallow hard, suddenly obsessed with the pattern on the tablecloth. My older brother Greg, the golden child, cleared his throat. Come on, Mark. That's a little dramatic, he said, voice a little too thin. Mark raised an eyebrow. Is it? You got a brand new fishing boat for your birthday last year. Know what I got? A gas station gift card. And it wasn't even activated. Someone snorted. I think it was Uncle Dave. Aunt Linda, Dad's younger sister, crossed her arms. I remember when I graduated college. Dad gave me a used coffee maker and told me to go make something of myself. She glanced at him, eyes sharp. You bought Paul a brand new car that same year. Poor Paul suddenly looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. The whole room was starting to unravel. I watched my father's jaw tighten, his hands gripping the arms of his chair like he was bracing for a storm. That's enough, he said. But it wasn't. Not even close. Because for once, the people he'd always manipulated, divided, and kept in their place were standing up. And my daughter, my little girl, still clutching that stupid stick like it meant something, was watching all of it. And I wasn't about to back down now. I leaned in. You've made sure we all knew our place for years. You joked about it. Handed out insults like party favors. But this time, you crossed a line. You hurt my daughter. My voice sharpened. And I'm not letting that slide. His face flushed. Oh, come on. Don't be so sensitive. She's a kid. She doesn't care. She does, I said, cutting through the room like a blade. She's 7. And she already knows her own grandfather doesn't think she's good enough. That's not on her, Dad. That's on you. The silence that followed didn't just hang there. It pressed down. Something in his carefully controlled little world had snapped. And I could see in his eyes he knew it. He looked around, scrambling for support. Greg? Just stared into his drink. My mom? Still quiet. Still frozen. My cousins? Some were nodding. Others just watching. Waiting. No one was coming to save him. He scoffed. This is ridiculous. You're all blowing this out of proportion. I didn't blink. Am I? I turned and pointed toward the kids. My daughter had drifted over to where the other children were, but she wasn't playing. She sat off to the side, that stick still in her lap, just staring down at it like it held the answer to some big question. Tell me, Dad, I said, my voice low but steady. What did she do to deserve that? He waved a hand like he was brushing off a fly. Oh, stop. It was a joke. Was it? Mark asked from across the room. Because I don't remember anyone laughing but you. More murmurs. More weight. The room felt like it was sinking under years of quiet resentment. Greg finally spoke again, his voice uncertain. Look, Dad, maybe, he paused, then let out a slow breath, maybe you do take things too far sometimes. And that was it. That was the crack in the dam. The moment my father realized he wasn't just losing a petty argument. He was losing the room. Even his golden boy wasn't on his side anymore. His expression turned cold, and he dropped his voice. So what? You all want me to apologize? I shook my head. No. I don't want an apology, I said. He smirked like he'd just scored some kind of win, like I'd shown weakness. But I didn't stop there. I want you to understand that this was the last time. That smug little grin of his faded fast. What's that supposed to mean? He asked, trying to sound confused. It means I'm done, I told him. Done playing along. Done letting you act like my daughter doesn't count. I stood up straighter, leveled with him. I'm done with you. Those words hit him like a slap. His face turned red, then drained to white. Oh, don't be dramatic, he scoffed, but the fire in his voice was gone. What? You're just gonna cut me off over some stupid joke? He pushed. I held his stare. You already cut me off a long time ago. His mouth opened like he had something to say, but nothing came out. Because he knew. He knew I was right. The room was dead quiet. Then my mom, the same woman who'd spent her whole life patching things up, finally raised her head. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Maybe he's right. Just like that, my dad, the man who always ran the show, who always had the last word, had nothing. He gave this bitter little laugh. Oh, so that's how it is? After everything I've done for this family? He waved his hand around like he expected someone to leap to his defense. Nobody did. Even Greg, the golden child, wouldn't meet his eyes. For the first time in his life, my dad wasn't the loudest one in the room. And man, he hated that. He jabbed a finger at me. You really think you're better than me, don't you? I didn't even flinch. No, I said calmly. But I know I'm better than this. His nostrils flared. Fine. If that's how you feel, then don't expect me to come around anymore, he snapped, like it was some big threat, like I was supposed to beg. I just shrugged. Okay. His jaw tightened. You think you can just walk away from family? You already did, I shot back. When you decided some of us mattered and some of us didn't. I paused. I'm just making it official. Silence fell again. And I could see it the exact second it hit him. The control, the games, the guilt trips, they weren't working anymore. It was slipping right through his fingers. He turned to my mom. You're really gonna let him talk to me like this? She hesitated, then said softly, I think we need to listen. His face twisted like she'd stabbed him in the back. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw my daughter laughing with her cousins. Finally smiling. And right then, I knew. I'd already won. And for the first time in my life, I saw something on my father's face I'd never seen before. Fear. Not of me. Not of what I'd said. Fear of what was happening all around him. He'd spent years making sure we all stayed in line, like actors reading from a script he wrote. But now, the stage was falling apart, and he had no idea what to do. He looked at my mom again, voice sharp. So you're siding with him now? She shook her head, hands folded in her lap. I'm not siding with anyone, she said quietly. I'm just tired. That hit harder than I expected. She wasn't smoothing things over. She wasn't making excuses. She was finally saying what we'd all known deep down for years. Greg let out a long breath, rubbed the back of his neck. Dad, maybe we should just. My dad slammed his hand down on the table. No. Enough. The room froze. His face was flushed, his hands trembling as he pointed at me. You think you're some kind of hero? You think cutting me out makes you a better father? You have no idea what you're doing. I tilted my head. Let it sit for a second. Then I answered, voice steady. Actually, I do. I nodded toward my daughter. I'm making sure she never feels the way I did. I'm making sure she never has to wonder why her own grandfather treats her like she's invisible. I took a step closer, my voice dropping just enough. And most of all, I'm making sure she knows love isn't something you have to earn. His face twisted up like he wanted to fire back, but he didn't. He couldn't. Because deep down, he knew. He'd already lost. His jaw clenched, his teeth grinding like he was trying to chew through stone. He'd always been the guy with the snappy comeback, the cutting remark, the easy deflection. But not now. Not when the whole room had turned against him. "You're being ridiculous," he spat. "All this over a stupid stick." I nodded. "You're right." That caught him off guard. His lips parted, like he was ready for a fight I wasn't giving him. "It's not about the stick," I said. "It's about everything." I let that settle before I kept going. The favoritism. The manipulation. The way you made sure we all knew exactly where we stood. Then I added, "But you screwed up, Dad." His nostrils flared. "Oh yeah? How?" I turned slightly, just enough to look at everyone else, my mom, Greg, my cousins still standing there, still watching. "You made us believe we had to take it. That we didn't have a choice. That we had to keep playing along." I looked back at him and smiled, just a little. "But tonight? We finally realized something." He didn't move. "We don't need you." That was the final blow. He went stiff. Rigid. Like something inside him snapped. Then he turned to my mom again, desperate now, his voice like gravel. "Margaret. Are you seriously just gonna let him talk to me like that?" she asked, voice barely steady. I noticed her hands, usually calm, careful, always folded, just so twisting in her lap now. Then she whispered, "Maybe we should just go." That was the moment it all crumbled. A man who had spent a lifetime in control, calling the shots, always the loudest voice in the room, suddenly powerless. For the first time, my father had nowhere left to turn. No backup. No allies. He scanned the room, eyes darting from face to face, looking for someone to step up, defend him, give him a lifeline. But nobody moved. Not Greg. Not my mother. Not the cousins who'd spent years laughing at his bad jokes just to stay on his good side. The silence was crushing. And I could see when it finally hit him, he was alone. All our lives, he'd been the one we revolved around. He made himself the center of the family's orbit, and we all stayed close, afraid of what might happen if we drifted too far. But now? Now it was him, out there on his own. And he couldn't handle it. "You're all being dramatic," he muttered under his breath, tossing back the last of his drink like it was some kind of punctuation. Nobody replied. He let out a sharp exhale, like he was trying to pull himself together. "Fine," he snapped. "If this is how everyone feels, maybe I should just leave." He stood, yanking down on his jacket, trying to make it look like this was his decision, like he was in control. But we all saw it for what it was. A man walking out of a room that had stopped listening to him. I watched him head toward the door, his step stiff and awkward, his shoulders bunched up around his ears. He didn't say goodbye. Didn't even glance my way. He just walked out. And when that front door closed behind him, it echoed, sharp and final. Like the last note of a song no one really wanted to hear in the first place. The room went still. Nobody moved. It was like we were all holding our breath, waiting for him to come storming back in, for my mom to chase after him, for someone to crack a joke to cut the tension. But none of that happened. Instead, my mom let out this long, shaky breath and reached for her wine like it was the only thing holding her upright. "Well," she murmured, mostly to herself, "I suppose that was overdue." And just like that, the ground shifted. Greg, my dad's favorite, the golden boy, rubbed his hands over his face and gave this bitter little laugh. "God," he muttered. "I can't believe it took this long." Aunt Linda, who'd spent decades keeping her mouth shut around him, let out a sharp scoff. "Took this long? I gave up on him 30 years ago. Then the dam really broke." Mark, my cousin, sighed and shook his head. "Man, I should have said something years ago." Even Paul, the youngest of us, always glued to his phone, looked up and said, "I thought I was the only one who noticed what a jerk he was." For so long, we'd all tiptoed around my father, careful with our words, trying to stay in his good graces. He'd kept us divided, competing for his approval. But now? Now it was like we were finally free to speak. And for the first time, we actually did. Stories came pouring out. Aunt Linda talked about how he refused to come to her wedding just because he didn't like who she married. Mark said that when he lost his job and asked Dad for help, the man laughed and told him, "Sounds like a you problem, kid." Greg, who'd always had that golden spotlight, finally admitted that being the favorite never felt like love, just pressure. Just a constant need to prove himself. And my mother? She stared down at her wine, voice barely audible when she said, I spent so many years smoothing things over. I don't even know who I am without it. Her words just hung there, heavy. Then, of all people, my daughter, my sweet 7-year-old, got up and walked over to her grandma. She climbed into her lap, looked up at her with those big, serious eyes, and said, "It's okay, Grandma. You don't have to do that anymore." My mother's eyes welled up with tears. And right then, the past didn't feel like a prison anymore. That night didn't end in awkward silence. There was no explosion, no guilt trip, no storm. It was different. Calmer. Realer. We stayed. We talked. We laughed, but this time not because we were trying to survive the night or win points. We laughed because we wanted to. Greg and Mark started cracking up about the weirdest, most useless gifts Dad had given them over the years. Aunt Linda topped off her wine and said, "Next year, Christmas is at my house, and we're doing it my way." And my daughter? She played with her cousins like nothing had happened. No more worrying about being good enough. No more weight on those tiny shoulders. Just a kid. Laughing. Free. And as I watched her, it hit me, I had spent my entire life chasing my father's approval. Trying to be enough. Trying to keep the peace. But tonight? Tonight I'd done something better. I'd ended the cycle. And that was worth more than anything he could have ever given me. As the night wound down and people started heading out, the whole place felt different. Lighter. Like a weight had finally been set down, and no one had even realized they'd been carrying it. Before leaving, my mom stood at the door, pausing for a second. "I don't know what happens next," she said, a little lost. I nodded. Me neither. She looked over at my daughter, still laughing on the floor. A soft, sad smile crossed her face. Then she whispered, "But maybe that's a good thing." And for the first time in my life, I truly believed her. Later, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she looked up at me with a sleepy little grin. "Dad?" "Yeah? I think I like my stick." I chuckled, brushing her hair from her eyes. "Yeah?" She nodded. "Because now I know it doesn't matter." I kissed her forehead, feeling something well up in my chest, love, pride, maybe even relief. Because she was right. And after generations of letting one man's opinion define our worth, we were finally free of it.